Hey, what's going on? It's someone that's no one, and welcome back to another story mix. As you can tell by the title, this is on dissociatives, and these reports are all from back in the day, many of which you can't find on the channel anymore due to the guidelines. So here we are to present them in this mix. And I do want to note that the quality and my delivery will vary, but we're bringing these videos back with authenticity. But we got 5 stories for you guys. Let me know what kind of story mix you want to see next, and if you want to see more of these, you already know. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe if you aren't already, and leave a comment. So let's waste no more time and get right into this. Actually life-changing. After spending years thinking very fondly of DXM, I decided it was time to try another dissociative. I managed to order MXP and spent several hours finding a sweet spot via the Shogun method of starting very small and increasing dosage. By the time I reached approximately 75 milligrams, I found myself feeling quite nice. My body felt warm and dry and clean. I had expected something like a DXM, but DXM has a much more liquid feel, oozy, whereas MXP felt like cloth. I recall feeling incredibly reckless, acting as strangely as I liked in front of my parents, which provoked them to ask, "What are you on?" as they will. I told them nothing at all and fled to the basement. In the basement, I insuflated, I would say, 25 more milligrams and put on some music. It was music that I never heard before, just something I found on the 420 Chan Dissociative discussion, a man playing guitar. I remember the music not only sounded incredible, but felt very good to listen to, nearly orgasmic. In fact, I was moaning out loud, which provoked my dad to come down and investigate. Normally, I would be much more cautious, but I'd like to stress that even at a low dose, the sort of dissociation that MXP provides you with may delete all worry and anxiety to a level that is actually dangerous. By the time my dad came downstairs, I was attempting to sulfate more and raise the dose, but was unable to, as he had removed the door from my bedroom earlier that week and therefore I had no privacy. He called the police, and what followed is a gigantic debacle involving the police, the hospital, and later the mental hospital, but that's all ancient history. During this debacle, however, I remember a growing warmth in my head, around the temples, and a wonderful sense of peace. I told the police officer, "I feel great," and actually tried to discuss the effects with him, which he had no interest in doing. Normally I have severe social anxiety, but I was able to do both this, and later on I recall telling the 2 nurses how pretty I thought their eyes were, and then comparing and contrasting their 2 pairs of eyes for them. I should note that even at this low dose, there are spaces which I can't quite remember or can't remember the order of, but this could be also attributed to DXM use earlier in the week. Also at a certain point, I'm not sure where it falls on the timeline, I completely exploded. Not physically exploded, MXP isn't that dangerous, but emotionally. Yelling and screaming in a way that I'm intensely embarrassed about now, like a spoiled little girl. I would recommend MXP only for an environment void of high suspicions. In low doses, take it with a group of friends who you know are taking a drug. I would personally like to combine it with cannabis to negate the anxiety and embarrassment cannabis usually lays on me. In high doses, because it's a dissociative, I'd recommend taking it in either an absolutely safe place in which you're virtually locked away, alone, or with only 1 or 2 friends. Being disconnected from reality. My most recent experience. I had only been home for a few hours after my week-long New Year's trip. I had been staying with friends, drinking and celebrating the beginning of the new year. Before I knew it, I wanted to make my first voyage into the Memantiverse that night. I'd begun unpacking my bags and cleaning up the house in preparation for the inevitably prolonged and arduous journey that high doses of Memantine always present. Before carefully weighing in and capping my dose, 150 milligrams of fluffy, crystal white, powdered Memantine hydrochloride. I took my dose orally about 7 p.m. Knowing full well the duration of these trips go far, and how long the onset for the drugs take to set in, I began to occupy myself for the first few hours by cooking myself a light meal before tripping, like I always do. I found eating before taking the dose can slow down the onset even further than what it is already. And with ample time between taking the dose and it fully kicking in, eating this window is ideal. After I've eaten, I sat down and began browsing Reddit. The fact that I've taken the Memantine has almost completely been forgotten by me. I begin to feel a bit spacey and calm. I light up a cigarette, like after most meals, and notice the slow wisp of smoke dancing around my hand. This is when I remembered about the Memantine, almost 2 hours after taking the dose. To really set myself up for a relaxing come-up, I put on Pink Floyd's Wish You Were Here album, queuing up a few hours worth of psych rock, alt electro, and anything else I could find that helped guide my self-reflecting, calm mindset I was entering. By about 10 p.m., 3 hours after dosing, I had begun to peak. My depth perception had lost all focus, not quite enough to force double vision, but enough that objects close to me like my laptop or hands felt like they were fluctuating between being hundreds of meters away, making me feel like a giant, or incredibly close to me, feeling like I was somehow a tiny person laying on my bed. The walls had started warping, and the less I focused on my surroundings and more on my laptop/hands, my perception of reality just outside those objects had all but vanished. It was like sitting in a void with only my very immediate surroundings present. At this point, I found darkness to let visuals take hold much more, almost as if letting my mind's imagination of what could be there much more real than my distorted perception of what was actually there. I turned off the lights and only let the faint glow of the half moon from the window illuminate my room. Staring into the darkness, watching as my room would transform into vast cathedrals or other worldly dimensions, I lose track of time. Although Memantine causes a diminished response to nicotine, I still find the habit of smoking incredible when on my journey. It can pull apart my sense of balance, and this in particular instance, the world began spinning around me, and I had no choice but to just sit there and watch it tear apart into a dark, structureless space. Possibly one of the most beautiful experiences I've had on Memantine yet. I lay in that void for what feels like maybe 20 to 30 minutes before it began crashing down on me, and I briefly returned to reality. Memantine tends to come in waves, so these 5 to 10 minute windows of mild sobriety are opportunities for me to go to the bathroom and get water to stay hydrated. Given the duration of Memantine, each trip can give me a lot of particularly interesting experiences, and it would be impossible to explain or let alone remember every single one of them, but there's still 2 particular events during this trip I want to try and explain. After long periods of just laying there in the dark, my eyes became very adjusted to seeing very low amounts of light, and at one point after sitting up to stretch, I noticed a tiny orange light in the corner of my room. I just sat there staring at it, trying to work out what it could possibly have been for longer than I cared to admit. It began to slide away into the distance, and the more I focused on it, the further it seemed to get. Slowly the room around it turned into a tunnel, funneling all my vision down onto this faint orange dot. The walls of this well I was looking down had become red trendles, crawling all over each other to get out. Unfazed and calm about being stuck in this hole with this bizarre situation, I started to try and climb towards the dot, to only very abruptly find myself first off the bed onto the floor. Reality snapped back in around me, and the orange dot was just the light on my charger for my laptop. Duh. The other notable occurrence, a particularly strange and very lifelike visual, was during the very last legs of the trip. I tend to fall asleep about 10 hours into a trip if I start around the same time, 7 p.m., and a hypnagogic state of consciousness can be achieved. Memantine tends to be just stimulating enough to keep me awake during most of the peak, and wears off just enough that the visuals can still be present as I'm falling asleep. I was staring at the wall as my mind had started wandering, watching it swirl and warp different shapes and patterns, but slowly a young girl's face pressed out of the wall. It appeared like she was carved out of clay, beautiful and calm, long wispy hair, but trapped in the wall. I could see into her eyes, glassy and clear. She was emotionless and never blinking. Her eyes followed me as I leaned over the edge of my bed. I felt like I knew her, but looking back now, I know I had never seen her before in my life. We stared into each other's eyes for several minutes before she slowly sunk back into the wall where she emerged, leaving a dark mist as I finally fell asleep. Waking up around 10 a.m., 15 hours after dosing, I still felt heavily dissociated. My body still numb and distant. I get up to go pee, stumbling with no sense of balance, and eventually go back to sleep for several hours. Today is 48 hours since dosing, and I'm still feeling mildly dissociated, tired, and uncoordinated, but like usual, it's slowly improving. This is somewhere in the vicinity of my 20th high-dose Memantine trip, so it's nothing out of the ordinary, but I don't think I'm used to it yet. Being disconnected for reality for a solid 12 hours is not something you grow accustomed to easily. My soul craves this magic. Deschloroketamine lessons. DCK has become my favorite drug, and I've tried everything. Coke, Molly, LSD, DXM, opioids, ketamine, mushrooms, PCP, RCs, ethnobotanicals, DMT, Datura, Xanax. Honestly, more I can't remember. I have quit all the above, and to be honest, DCK has been the most psychologically addicting substance I've run across. I don't physically crave it, my soul craves this magic. Before I jump into describing what I've learned so far, I must warn you, this is a sacred substance that should not be taken lightly. It has the power to manifest my life's wildest dreams. On the flip side, it can turn my worst nightmares into a reality too. It all depends on how I use it. On a physical level, it has speculation over claims of antibacterial or immunosuppressant properties. I've had a Lyme and mono in the past, so my immune system is on the weaker side. I noticed the speculated antibacterial and immunosuppressant after the first month of use. I need to be taking care of myself. Probiotics and immune system support daily is vital to my health. I don't take this lightly. One last note. I determine how I use a substance by noting my state of mind. Am I using to escape, to learn, to get fucked up? Key questions to ask before diving in. Please take everything with a grain of salt. We all have different bodies and systems. Respect your body and listen to it. Ingestion. The method of ingestion will change the experience notably. Tolerance builds fast. Snorting. I notice the effects quicker as it enters my bloodstream faster. 5 to 20 minute onset is not uncommon. As I begin to swallow the drips, the high changes over the next 2 hours as my stomach begins to digest it. Motor functions begin to diminish as it digests. Small lines warm me up, which allow me to remain more lucid and in a clear headspace. Bigger lines get funky. Warning. I wouldn't make a habit of snorting it too often. I've woken up with congested nasal passages that produce lots of nasty, thick yellow mucus and a little blood. Clearing my nose with water before going to bed has helped me a lot. Smoking. The quickest way to get rocked is to smoke it. Effects hit fast, but they are more mellow than other methods of ingestion. I do lose some potency heating it up, I found. Eating whole rocks. This method works great as the rocks have to be broken down longer in my stomach, resulting in a more elongated high. Doesn't hit as hard, which can be problematic when tolerance builds. Eating crushed powder. Crushing rocks have proved to increase the intense effects. I use a vegetable capsule to ingest the crushed powder. I won't be testing any other methods of ingestion. Setting for use. This is not a party drug. I get dissociated and sedated, which does not pair well with unstable environments in which one needs to be on one's toes. I take this in a safe place like my room, have no obligations to attend to. Let me tell you a little story of why. I didn't understand this clearly, but I learned pretty fast. I look pretty normal to people who are sober. I found that I can hold long, deep conversations with people who cannot know of my substance use without a problem under the influence. I ate around 50 to 150 milligrams of rocks, and I could not see them clearly due to the heavy dissociation. Everything was blurry and morphing, but my mind was clear and I could talk relatively well. We were all talking about AI and other heavy topics, and even though I was gone, I continued to talk fine. To date, it is the most bizarre experience of my life. I managed to eat dinner around my family and relatives without anyone suspecting. At least no one said anything. They would have if they did. I did slur a few words here and there, so it wasn't perfect, and I'll never repeat it again. Deschloroketamine is a great tool for meditation. I prepare myself, make sure I have a safe place to lay and sit and listen to my favorite music with ample amounts of water and fruits. Also, it messes with my sleep cycle, so I plan my dives wisely. I have found 5 to 6 p.m. to be a good cutoff point. It lasts 3 to 4 hours, so I need to be in bed by 9 to 10 p.m. I have had past life memories come to me on DCK, and I've begun to work on mastering my own energy. I face every one of my demons and understand that I created them all. I see and feel things I've long forgotten, but it comes at a cost, and recovery is an uphill battle. All other trip reports seemed vague and strange before I got my hands on this wonderful drug. I now see why. It is almost impossible to explain. It's like a hard drive defragger for my mind and body. Hey, I was curious. The truth is, it was just about the last thing I hadn't tried. I've run out of a gamut of research chemicals, natural hallucinogens, mescaline extracts, acid, narcotics, anticholinergics, stimulants from Ritalin to Dexedrine to Adderall to Dissociative to cocaine, ecstasy, downers from Zolpidem to Xanax to GBL, and even a few of the commercially available piperazine blends. I played around with ketamine, probably on about 15 occasions. I've combined it with pot and, in one unfortunate evening, Ambien. I found it to be physically interesting, but mentally quite boring. This was intranasal, by the way. I messed around with DXM a few times at doses up to 500 milligrams. It makes me feel ill, but overall, it's just not worth the sickness. PCP, just the most interesting member on the list of big bad nasties to try. This list in my mind includes inhalants, heroin, meth, and crack. I take narcotics every day for back pain, so heroin really just doesn't sound like anything I need to fuck around with. Inhalants, shit. I'm a 4th year biochemistry major. I need all the brain cells I can get. So when my friend Liz called me up and told me she had a 4-person dose of PCP in the joint, I jumped on the chance to smoke that shit like it's going out of style because, I mean, who are we kidding? It really has gone out of style. Liz saved me half the joint. It was ugly and soiled with some dark brown coloring. Let me tell you, it didn't look like a joint anymore. It smelled somewhat musty, somewhat sour. She recommended I take a few puffs off of it and then put it down, but I never listened. I took the joint and broke it up into a pipe. Lighter touches bowl, boy inhales, boy holds breath as long as possible. If there was really cannabis in the thing, I certainly didn't taste it or feel it. The smoke was smooth enough, but with a strange, unrecognizable flavor. It didn't taste awful, but it didn't taste like something nature intended either. My Palo Alto rich kid sensibilities were excited by the horribly ugly joint, the rich chemical smoke, and the insane reputation this stuff has for being the dirtiest crap you could ever ingest. Here was something my stuffy, hippie friends would never try. Here was something never to mention casually to my yoga classmates, who all leaned toward the tripper side. I smoked about 90% of that 2-person joint dose before leaving poor little Liz with maybe a puff or two off the bowl. It wasn't until the thing was almost completely gone that I really felt something I knew to be more than just a resin buzz I'd catch off smoking in an empty bowl. So what did it feel like? Well, I need to be a bit colorful in my language because I can't really find the right words to describe it. The body high felt cold and metallic. It had the same feeling of a strong but subspace salvia dose, but with none of the irritating physical discomfort caused by salvia. I normally perceive a kind of ripping sensation in my joints and spine from salvia. I felt a similar kind of dislocation on PCP, but I was in much less pain than I would have been sober. Cannabis also has this effect on me, compounded by the back problems I currently treat with yoga, hardcore vinyasa style 5 times a week, and lorphanol 1 milligram 4 times a day. The body high left me with a sensation of being one step behind myself at all times, or one step ahead. My mind and my body felt like they were out of sync. It kind of reminded me of Robotech, where the pilot's neural connection would be more or less in step with the Gundam depending on who was piloting. The notion that I was in fact piloting a mech did cross my mind at several points in the evening. Walking became much more of a conscious exercise in moving each foot and assessing balance and weight distribution before continuing with the attempted gait. I felt pretty fucked up and chose to sit in my car and listen to some music to avoid my parents and the danger of falling on my face and ruining thousands of dollars of orthodontia. Man, no matter what we listened to, I just couldn't really get into the music. Everything sounded distant and hollow. The highs less high, the lows less low. The music seemed unable to penetrate my being, unable to provide me with any sort of auroral joy. I honestly just didn't really care what we played, so I turned off the music for fear of insulting my favorite artist by listening to them in such a state. As an aside, other dissociatives, namely DXM and N2O, tend to provide me quite enjoyable enhancement of music for me. Mentally, I was incredibly far gone. I was having the same trouble grasping ego and sensibility that I get from salvia. In fact, the only drug that's been able to alter my sense of self in such a manner was salvia. Even with something like 5-MeO-DMT, there's a sense of the observer. PCP gave me no such luxury. I was entirely thrashed. I didn't drink and drive, and I never will. Same goes for GHB. PCP is definitely now on the great big list of stuff to never drive on. Cannabis, not so much of a problem. Even the standard hallucinogens generally assist my driving capabilities and normal doses in the same manner that they improve my attentiveness, balance, and coordination in yoga. And just because I choose to take that ridiculous and immoral risk of placing myself and others on the road in danger by occasionally operating a moving vehicle while on LSD, it doesn't mean I endorse the same choice for everyone else. PCP, however, left me quite sure that I'd die within minutes if I tried to drive. By far, the characteristics feeling during the trip was a sense of surreality. I felt like I was living in a dream. Time lost meaning. My whole life prior to the evening faded from my consciousness. I was completely unable to process any sort of narrative regarding who I am and what my life is. It was kind of an ego death, but there was no greater awareness to replace what I'd lost. The trip was in no way scary, though I would definitely say the experience was incredibly strong. There was a noted lack of emotional reaction to anything I was feeling. You'd figure that as I was more fucked up than I'd ever really been before, I'd have some sort of strong feeling about my state of mind. Euphoria, dysphoria, neither. Overall, there was a sense of positive physical feeling. As the drug mellowed in intensity, the downhill journey began approximately 45 minutes after ingestion. I was left with the notion that I was somehow powerful, influential, able to solve problems and understand the needs of others in new and exciting ways. I had a flash of ego inflation in which I identified myself as being somewhat Christ-like for the final hour. There was very residual effects after the drug wore off, and I woke up the next day feeling just fine. Here's my overall synopsis. The onset was 5 to 10 minutes. I peaked for 25 minutes, and the total duration was 1.5 to 2 hours. And the overall effects included significant dissociation, ego negation, mild euphoria, stimulation, trouble walking, judging death, coordinating gross motor movement. My conclusions? Well, it's definitely incredible weird stuff. It's really nothing like anything I tried before. There were no moments of agitation or rage, no cop killer mentality. It wasn't particularly psychologically interesting though. I certainly didn't plumb the depths of my psyche or reach any new profound understandings about my strengths and weaknesses. I was just massively fucked up for like an hour and then it went away. I liked it better than ketamine or DXM. If it were available, I'd try it again in a heartbeat. I seriously recommend a trip sitter as a precaution against any stupid behavior, but I don't detect any inherent danger to the drug. It was definitely worth satisfying a morbid curiosity, and I'd recommend it to anyone putting so much other crap in their system that they really just might as well try this one too. Plasma and smooth metal. A little information about me first. I'm currently studying towards second-year chemistry, and I've always had a great interest in dissociative substances. I first tried ketamine roughly 4 years ago and have developed a moderate usage habit since, around 2 to 4 grams per month. I have extensive experience with ketamine, nitrous, methoxetamine, and have 3 experiences with 4-MeO PCP. In my opinion, I find that nothing has compared in magnitude of incredible experiences to ketamine, and that methoxetamine, 4-MeO PCP, and the such are just easily available but not so good replacements. Don't get me wrong, I've had great experiences with methoxetamine and 4-MeO PCP, but still feel there is something glaring missing from their experiences. Hopefully, with the acquisition of 50 mg 3-MeO PCP from a highly trusted source, I will be able to find a little gem within the chaos that many call the current research chemicals market. After some major derping about on the postal system's part, I received the package today and opened to find a small bag of pure white powder. Here is the trip report as I experienced the effects. My weight was 55 kilos or 125 pounds. The route of administration was sublingual, held for a few minutes, then washed down with water. The dosage, there was an initial trial, 10 milligrams, a 25 milligram booster, and then 15 milligrams to finish. The mindset, I had an excellent mood, had been anticipating trying this substance, although a little tired from a long day in college, nothing to do tomorrow apart from spend time relaxing at home. Experiment begin. 5:55 p.m. 10 milligrams is weighed accurately by difference and placed under the tongue for 2 minutes. Powder sticks to everything, so care is taken not to spill it. The amount of powder is minuscule. Last meal was at 12:45 p.m. 10 minutes in. Possibly first alerts, feeling slightly wobbly, could be a placebo or quick first effects from sublingual ROA, walking to the station to go see a showing of Persian music with my mom. 20 minutes in. Feeling some body warmth and a slight unreality to the train journey. Music may sound slightly enhanced, and I've gotten a smile on my face. Main effects haven't seemed to materialize at this point. From what I've read, it may be an hour or longer until it fully kicks in. Not sure if this substance cross-tolerates with any other dissociative. My main concern is cross-tolerance with methoxetamine and ketamine, but I haven't used a dissociative in a couple of weeks. 45 minutes in. Definite increase in effects. Everything feels slowed down. Time feels dilated. Typing on my phone seems to take an age to complete a sentence. Reading has become difficult on the tube, and walking to the next platform has become slightly wobbly and off balance. Walking along a flat, airport-style conveyor belt in Waterloo Station is great fun. There's a building sense of wonder in everything around me, and things look odd, but not threatening. Very excited, still got a smile on my face. 53 minutes in. Effects still increasing. Being packed onto a rush hour train was disorienting, but highly amusing. I kept getting the urge to laugh out loud. This is unlike ketamine, which makes me feel extremely awkward and alien in public, especially on brightly lit trains. Not entirely sure how much more the trip is going to develop, but I am about to meet my mom, so we shall see how the conversation holds up. Skin is feeling slightly tingly, and depth perception is certainly on the blink. Going up in the lift was a bizarre experience. An hour and 12 minutes in. Just got to the theater to see the music, feeling excellent. Conversation is flowing freely and mood is greatly improved. A slight sense of motion is noticed, but nothing overpowering, a perfect dose for being in public and communicating with others. I have noticed slight muscle twitching and cramping, but nothing major. There's a slight sensation of shifting/motion and the occasional visual flicker. 2 hours 45 minutes in. Just got out one of the most incredible musical performances I've ever seen. The music was fantastic and the atmosphere was electric. The musicians seemed to have an almost telepathic communication, and the way they interacted was very special. The effects of the drug plateaued a couple of songs into the performance, and getting out I realized I am still slightly off balance and speech is slightly impaired. If anything, it seemed the music enhanced the drug. No other effects materialize. I stop here and it's highly likely I will redose a higher amount when I get home to continue the experiment. 5 hours 20 minutes in. 11:15 p.m. I have just arrived home and about to redose this highly interesting compound to better explore its effects. In a more stable environment, I believe I will be able to investigate better. 25 milligrams was weighed accurately by difference and placed under the tongue for 4 minutes. The dose was then washed down with water. The chemical taste is more noticeable and is very, but not overpoweringly, burnt/bitter. I had a meal about an hour ago, just before 10 p.m., so my stomach is fairly full. 5 hours 35 minutes in. A sudden sharpening of the vision announces the beginning. Something has definitely changed, but I can't define what. Still have a slight bitter taste in the mouth from the sublingual dose. I believe I'm in for a ride. Some nausea present, but nothing unmanageable. May have something to do with the fact I ate so recently. 6 hours 5 minutes in. 30 minutes later and I still feel on the cusp of something big. Somewhat frustrating, but I am going to wait at least an hour before the redose to even consider taking the rest. 6 hours 20 minutes in. Effects seem to be increasing slowly but steadily. There's a definite warp in perception, but seems very colorful and sharp. Everything seems to have taken on a very slight motion, and I'm suddenly finding things fascinating. Noticeable wobble in my walk, and I feel a warmth, or a numbness, at my forehead and extremities. The token dissociative static hiss is present now, and its volume seems to be increasing. Nothing major yet, but I am getting extremely impatient and am considering doing the rest, 15 milligrams, to kick it up a notch. 6 hours 35 minutes in. Lost my patience and dosed the last 15 milligrams of the 50 milligrams I have. Hopefully I'll really see this compound shine now. The last 15 milligrams was administered sublingually and held this time for 5 minutes before washing down with water. 6 hours 45 minutes in. Currently feels like a low-dose methoxetamine trip, but much sharper. Objects seem very well defined, and there seems to be a building euphoria. I can make out the individual cracks in my skin as I am typing, quite unlike any dissociative I have ever done before. Considering the amount I have taken, this seems to be a light trip so far, but I'm expecting more, I hope. Very slow to build, but may have something to do with the full stomach issue earlier. 7 hours in. I'm in a nice place right now, feeling very warm and woozy, but I'm still somewhat disappointed with the lack of major effects. Hopefully effects will increase, but I am unsure to what degree. Feeling very tingly and there's a slight pressure on my temples. Nothing groundbreaking. 7 hours 10 minutes in. Everything is simultaneously wavy but sharp, unsure if effects are still increasing or not. This drug has a very high definition feel about it, very crisp, clear. Seems like these are the peak effects, and judging by the fact I can still type properly, I think I have reached a plateau. Exciting effects, but not enough material to explore this properly. Not to be disappointed, I believe this material has great potential and will conduct another experiment next weekend. 7 hours 30 minutes in. Oh wait, I suddenly realize I am pretty gone. Typing and expressing words has become difficult. There's a definite buzz to this, but I am having quite fun reporting it down. I'm watching video walkthroughs of the game Toonby and alternating between the two. Oh, there's a very nice pressure on my head and I've got great energy. Should I try to make some music maybe? 7 hours 45 minutes in, music production greatly hindered, getting the same feelings coming down from methoxetamine but with a much smoother ride. Feels much more friendly. 8 hours 50 minutes in. Still coming down from this compound, still feel great, very bubbly. I have to say I doubted it, nice stuff. The morning after. In retrospect, this is a very special compound. It has all the basics there for an essential dissociative, but it also has a real sparkle on the side. It definitely whizzes past methoxetamine and certainly 4-MeO PCP. I'm putting this compound right up there at the top along with ketamine and MDMA. There's a very high definition feel to its effects, and I find there's a very interdimensional aspect to the dissociation. More metallic feeling than ketamine certainly, this substance radiates the feeling of smooth metal and plasma. The come up time was long, being around 1.5 hours in the experiments, although the full stomach may have had a part to do in that, and the plateau I think lasted around 1 to 1.5 hours if I remember correctly. Sleeping was fairly difficult afterwards, but not in any way uncomfortable. 25 milligrams of diphenhydramine was taken to help nudge me in the direction of sleep, which still didn't come for a couple of hours after the last report entry. I experienced some of the most intense and bizarre dreams I've ever had last night, many of which involved fire, being on fire, dreaming I was a pastry in an oven, etc. These were not frightening, but extremely intense and very vivid and colorful, something I think was greatly potentiated by the diphenhydramine taken before bed. To conclude, I cannot wait to experiment with this compound again in a different environment. There's so much potential here, and this has given me a great deal to think about. Physically, I do not feel it put a huge pressure on my system, although my heart rate was increased for the duration of the trip and has not completely returned to normal the day after. I advise caution for anyone who is going to indulge in this, as it is a little research compound. I hope this report has helped map out some new territory. Be safe.